If you want to make your living as a musician, you're going to have to take all kinds of different gigs. Outside of performing live, a lot of musicians have work as session players, where they record on other people's songs. There is all kinds of opportunities for that in the more major music cities. I'm talking Nashville, I'm talking New York, I'm talking LA. But living in Cincinnati, Ohio, those opportunities are a little harder to come by. Last week, one of my bestest friends ever, Sam Ruff, hit me up and asked me to play bass on one of the songs from his upcoming album. I love these kinds of gigs, so of course I was happy to take his call. And we'll just talk about the song a little bit and the bass parts a little bit.
Okay, I'm not very prepared, but let's go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna slice the shit out of this footage, and there are many cuts in my video already. So in this video, I'm just gonna go over how I figure out what it is I'm going to play on bass when recording on someone else's song. So let's dive right into it. So for this particular session, I recorded on my Sire V9 Marcus Miller 5-string jazz bass, running into my Focusrite Scarlett 2i2 2nd gen, then into Logic Pro X. In terms of what to play on the song as a hired musician, that tends to vary a little more. If someone approaches you with a recording and they don't give you any chord charts or bass parts or lead sheets, then it's up to you to listen to the track, figure out what they're doing, and then come up with your own thing around that. However, a lot of times they will come to you with a vision in mind for what they want the song and your part to sound like. It's so nice when they give you what they want written out. It makes the process so much easier. Luckily, working with Sam, he's very thorough. He sent me not only the track without any bass, but the track with MIDI bass entered in, and he sent me a bass score with most of the parts notated. He left 2 sections open with the chord changes, and he didn't list anything for the ending. What I like to do a lot of times is record one take that is pretty bare bones, pocket, basic bass line. You can never go wrong there. Then I usually like to send someone a second take that is a little busier. I might throw in some fills, I might spice up my bass lines, just make it more interesting. And then it can be fun as well to throw in a third take that is just another idea you had that you were feeling. This gives the person arranging the song the ability to pick between all 3 of those takes for each part. If they don't like something you did on the first take, they can take from take 2 or even take 3. This really helps when you're trying to actualize what the person was thinking in their head for the song. And that's basically it. The other parts I just played as they were written. After I listened through the song once, I called him up and went more in depth with what he was feeling for the bass. The first thing right off the bat he mentioned was he wanted a 5-string. So of course that makes me realize that he wants me to use a lot of those low notes that I'm offered with the 5th string. Outside of that, there are a couple sections that he got more specifically into. The first part he talked about was section C, verse 1. Sam said he didn't know if that was possible to play all of those harmonics on bass, which as you can see, it's not. So I told him I would feel out that part and do what I could. I didn't want to do a bunch of overdubs, tapping the harmonics or fretting a note and playing the harmonic. So I kind of met him in the middle. I threw in a couple harmonics that I could, and the other notes I just played straight.
My internal clock
The next part he talked about was section D, the trumpet solo. He just told me to play a little more sparse and laid back, considering it's a solo section for another instrument. next sections he talked about was sections J and K, which were those sections that have the chord changes notated and didn't specify what bass line he wanted me to play. He wanted me to do my own thing. So I asked him a little more about that, and he told me he wanted me to play dubby, pocket, and he referenced I Am the Walrus by the Beatles. Having a reference track that someone wants you to be inspired by when you're playing your part is so beneficial. You can go listen to the song, hear what they're playing, or hear their tone, or whatever, and then draw total inspiration from that to influence what you put on someone else's part. Nope, I'm just getting... Yeah. Adam Neely did it in one of his videos for sections J and K where you had chord changes. How did you feel about the 3 different versions I sent you?
Well, in the chart, I think there's just slashes for those sections, right? With chords on top.
Yeah.
So it's supposed to be pretty open-ended, and that's kind of an interesting thing when you're working remotely. When you're reading a chart, slashes tend to work better when you have a bunch of musicians in the same room playing together, and they can kind of vibe off each other.
Definitely.
And react in real time. But when you're doing remote recording like this, it's kind of different because obviously the drum track doesn't change, so you know what's going to happen, and it's less spur of the moment. It becomes less of an improvised thing, I think, and more of a written part at that point. It becomes less of a jam and more of a composed part. But I thought it was cool when you give a composer or a producer or a client or whoever, if they give you something like that and you give them 3 options to choose from, it does help because they can, slice it and pick what they want and what they don't want. I mean, I think you did exactly what you're supposed to do of, giving options and having some sparser parts and having some more complex parts, and you kind of just give the client or whoever stuff to choose from.
Yeah, you had a good point with it being less of a jam and more of a written piece. Because I did multiple takes before, like the footage that I show in this video, and I think the first take I sent you was pretty much improvised. I just had a general idea for that, and then the second take I had written out a little more. And then obviously the third take was just me playing what you had written for the first part of that section throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, I don't think I really ended up using that. I maybe used like 2 bars of that one. I think I used mostly like 90% of take 1 and like 8% take 2 and 2% of take where it's just J and K.
And then Sam didn't have anything notated on the sheet music for the end of the song, which is this kind of ethereal guitar section. He told me he might scrap it, or he might use it as an interlude song in between songs on the album. He told me I could mess around with it and play something if I'm feeling it, but if not, it's not a big deal. Since there's potential that he might use it, I wanted to at least give him something for it, so I did 2 takes of that. So when I called you the first time we talked about the track, for the outro section where you're playing that airy guitar part, after getting the bass part, and you said you've added some other instruments since I sent you the bass, have you decided more if you're going to keep that outro section or use it as an interlude song?
Yeah, actually, like the very last drum hit before that section, I put like this really interesting reverb, and it like feeds back like an amp, and it goes like super feedback land, and then it comes back down into that guitar part. So when you first called me, like that part sounded super tacked on, and I wasn't sure if I was going to use it or not. But because I heard your bass part, I felt more inspired to keep it, and then I found this really cool transition with feedback, and I think it kind of lands it into this kind of ethereal place. And I'm gonna like add a bunch of delay automation to make it more dreamy around there. But yeah, I'm happy with what you added. Also, that guitar part, I tracked like maybe over a year and a half ago, just like direct in, just messing around, getting ideas down, and sometimes things like that end up on final recordings. And that guitar is actually kind of out of tune and off time, so I wasn't sure if it would be easy to track to in terms of like intonation and stuff, but I kind of like it. It gives it that, you know, not perfect vibe.
Yeah, that's exactly how I was feeling it too, because you don't play a set number of measures every time you repeat. That part changes too, so I could tell the whole thing was kind of rough. It's really cool hearing that it was a rough idea that you recorded direct in over a year ago and you're using now. And so I didn't even worry about being too perfect with it. As you could probably hear, I wasn't right on with the guitar at every point, but it sounds like that might add a cool vibe or a cool flavor to it now anyways.
Yeah, it's a good contrast. It's a good breather, I think. I don't know if it'll be an outro or an interlude track, as you mentioned, but I like the contrast because the rest of the song is so like quantized and intentional and kind of surgically put together, and then that part's kind of more loose and airy, as you said.
Yeah, and that's another thing as a composer or arranger, is balancing those sections of, you know, this is my grandiose music idea, and then having sections that are really laid back and tame and kind of spur of the moment and improvised.
Yeah, I think the mindset I always try to keep, it's this Quincy Jones quote. He says, always leave room in the studio for God to walk in, like unexpected to walk in, or something completely out of the blue. Like, so that's what I try to do. I just, you know, I have this general idea, this general vibe, a lot of things put together, but I always have that little bit of space, this little bit of leeway, whether that be giving you, the bassist, or someone else, or a mixing engineer, someone their own space for creativity or their own room to add ideas or take things out. Or you gotta be flexible, because sometimes the coolest things are not planned.
Right, that's perfectly said. Thank you so much, Sam, for letting me use your song and make this video. I love this song. I love your solo project, Cloudgazer, and I always appreciate working with you. I'll have links to Cloudgazer for you to check out the music below. And thank you guys so much for watching this video. It was a lot of fun to make. This is my first educational or vlog style video, but I'm always looking for more feedback and some useful advice on these videos. So if you have any comments, leave them below, and please like the video and subscribe to my channel while you're at it. All the likes and comments and shares and love really help me out. They help my YouTube channel grow, and they help me as a YouTuber grow, since I'm real fresh and new. So thank you guys for all the support, and I'll see you next time. Keep it funky.